Welcome to the Anti-Architect Podcast. I am your host, Christian Giordano. As president and owner of the design firm Mancini Duffy, I am driven by a quest for learning and radically changing the industry. With this podcast, I'm hoping to improve the industry that I'm so passionate about by taking a critical look at how architects work through a variety of voices and shared experiences. Hello, Anti-Architect Podcast listeners. I'm excited to have Lawrence Bradford Perkins, FAIA, or Brad, as most people would call him, as my guest today on the Anti-Architect Podcast. Brad is joining me here in our New York studios live. Brad is the co-founder of Perkins Eastman, a global firm that specializes in architecture, interior design, urban design, planning, landscape architecture, and much more. Headquartered in New York City, the company was founded by Brad and Mary-Jean Eastman, FAIA. Brad has directed major projects in all of Perkins Eastman's key practice areas and has served as principal in charge of work around the world. These projects range from small nonprofit organizations to senior living to major healthcare facilities, mixed-use developments, even master planning of entire cities around the world. Perkins Eastman has over 1,100 employees in 24 locations worldwide. The firm has completed assignments in more than 60 countries and across 5 continents and has received 800 awards. I'm sure it's more by now. Brad comes from a long line of successful architects, which we'll discuss later more in detail. His family could be described as a dynasty of architecture, if such a thing exists. Brad has lectured at Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, USC, Texas A&M. He teaches at City College of New York and the University of Hawaii, and is a faculty member of Cornell's College of Architecture, Art, and Planning. Additionally, he has authored 9 books. Pretty impressive. Brad, thank you so much for being my guest here today and for coming all the way here.
Well, thank you, Christian. Coming all the way here is...
It's relative, but you know.
Yeah.
So I just want to tell a little story here. How you and I met really initially when we were working on a project together, Times Square, TSX project. We had a recent episode about that on this podcast as well with the contractor and some others. And I admit when we first met, I was secretly hoping you were going to take the job away from us because we were completely ill-equipped to handle this job. But I'm very grateful for the support that you all offered, sort of reaching out and helping us with your firm, helping our firm, and eventually overcoming the challenges that we had and turning that around.
I think it's a project both can be very proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at the end of the day, I always learned that architects were in competition with each other and, we should fight to the death to win the projects and not share secrets or anything like that. And part of this podcast is really to just talk about architects and what we do well and what we don't do well. At this stage in your career, how has your perception of the relationship between architects collaborating over time changed?
Well, I've always actually felt that a lot of projects have required really close collaboration between architects. We've, particularly overseas where it's almost always mandatory, and but even here in this country, we have worked with other architects across the U.S. on projects. And frankly, as projects have gotten larger and more complex and requiring more specialized capabilities, teaming is really the right thing to do. There are some firms that are better at collaborating than others. There are some who still believe in that only they can do the project and they don't want anybody else involved. But that's becoming probably the minority.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. And I see that in our practice too. I mean, we're always collaborating, whether it's with you or other architecture firms. I totally agree. What has been your biggest frustrations with the architecture industry in general?
Well, I think the basic business model for architecture has really never been a very good one. and somehow we, in what is still a highly competitive profession, and where some of our own self-inflicted wounds have made it economically a more challenging profession than, say, law or accounting or even medicine. So it's so the business model, which I think is about to be very much disrupted by AI, maybe we will emerge from it more like a valued consulting firm than somebody who produces a lot of drawings that most owners don't even look at. So
yeah, that's a good point. So going down that path of AI, which I'm glad you mentioned it, what are your thoughts behind AI and how architects may work with it or against it, or?
Well, I mean, I can't claim to be an expert, but obviously the impact of technology, which really didn't start until desktop computing, and all the things that have come with it. I mean, remember the iPhone is 16 years old. When I first started working overseas, I communicated back to the home office by telex. And then you could book a phone call. Now you can stand in the middle of a rice paddies in Vietnam and have a video call with somebody in another country. It's all these things have been accelerating, and now if AI lives up to its potential, where I think the big drafting room of the past is probably a dodo bird, and that's probably in some respects a good thing, and the profession is adapted to the changes in technology reasonably quickly. The business model is still the same, but I'm actually hoping that it's a positive change.
Do you foresee it where the designers are still conceptually designing, themselves, and then maybe some of the production is being done with the AI?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think taking somebody with 7 years or 5 years of expensive training and then turning them into draftsmen is part of the bad business model.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Especially when there are people in other countries who are at 1/4 the cost, who are more than willing to do the work and want to do the work, and with technology now can do the work.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on black cape architects? And do you believe that firms like yours and mine can produce equally compelling architecture as the, quote unquote, black cape architects?
Well, of course. But I mean, there's some of what you refer to as black cape architects who I have great respect for, and I think are exceptional talents, and as long as they don't believe all their own press releases, they're, I think they are great leaders in the profession. And then there are others where I think that they're a function of PR,
right,
and not necessarily that much substance. So.
Yeah. Because I look at some of the work that your firm has produced, and at a smaller scale, obviously the work that we've produced. But I would say the work that you've produced overseas, especially, is as extraordinary as any other architect out there. So, and I feel like the more corporate architects don't get the credit, that
well,
is deserved.
Some do. I mean, Skidmore and Merrill has been a leader, for basically my lifetime, and they're about as corporate as they come, but they continue to reinvent themselves and do work that's equal, in my opinion, to what you're referring to as the black capes.
Or starchitects, I guess, is another word.
But and there are other. I think once you become a large firm, it's tough not to get labeled a corporate firm. But the reality is, given our practice, I don't, on the inside, it doesn't look very corporate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I agree. So if you had to pick one thing, what annoys you about your fellow architects?
I would say that one thing that over the years is the sort of cattiness about other architects. I find a bit tiresome, that there is just a lot of sort of knocking other architects, which I don't think serves any purpose.
Yep. And then as far as architects and training goes, and you obviously do a lot of education, and we'll talk about that, do you think that it's a profession where we should have a little bit more on the business side of architecture training and, go to business school or something like that?
Well, I feel pretty strongly that given how complex both the profession of architecture is now and the projects we were working on, the total almost complete absence of business training or management training is a handicap for architects. And I mean, I did an MBA, and I didn't do it necessarily initially for the right reasons, but it turned out to be an invaluable part of my education.
Yeah,
So,
I'd say if that's a regret I have is actually getting not getting my master's degree. I very much enjoyed my master's degree and worked with some of those Black Cape architects who were extraordinary people. But the business training is definitely where I lacked, and I've learned that kind of on the job, basically.
well, that's what most architects. Most architects. And I mean, I had extraordinary advantages in I had a grandfather and father who ran large successful practices, and I at least, kind of had a really good introduction to what the job really was. And but even they both learned on the job, but it certainly helped for me to have seen that. But then, my 2 years at Stanford were extraordinary in terms of helping.
Yeah. So that's a perfect segue into the sort of, let's call it the architecture dynasty that I referred to. I'm not sure if I have this correct, but your grandfather, Dwight Perkins, founded Perkins Fellows and Hamilton in 1894. Then your father, Lawrence Bradford Perkins, co-founded Perkins Will, which is still very much in existence today and an enormous global firm. And then around 1985, more or less, you founded Perkins Eastman with Mary-Jean.
Really 83. But
83, okay.
I mean, I had a previous partnership from 81 to 83, and then bought that partner out, and Mary-Jean and I went forward from there.
Yeah. So given that family history, is it, you were going to be an architect no matter what? Was that a given?
Well, I was in my siblings, I was the one who liked to draw.
Okay.
And, I went to job sites with my father, and so it was and I was sent to art school from the time I was fairly young. And so it was kind of assumed that. And, I was a kind of a normal kid, and I didn't give a whole lot of thought about what I wanted to be when I grew up. And somebody asked me, I said, maybe an architect. And then I went to architectural school at Cornell and began rethinking, was this really what I wanted to do? And I took a rather long break from, transferred out of architecture school. My degree from Cornell, even though it's ironic that I've been on the faculty. I'm not teaching this year, but for 10 years. And because I don't have a degree from the architectural school. My degree is in Latin American history. So,
really?
Yeah. Well, I finished a degree in ancient history and then realized that wasn't a career. And so I finished in Latin American history a year later.
So in essentially, you are a third generation architect in a sense, and I I know a little bit about sort of generational businesses being in, I think I've told him, in this thing called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And there's a lot of people in YPO that are, family businesses and generational businesses. And one thing my perception of that was always, hey, well, good for them. They started on third base, and that's really easy. And I wish I was in that situation. However, I will tell you that getting to know, I would say almost all of them, the pressure of being sort of the second and third and fourth, and some of these people are fifths, way down the line. It's a tremendous amount of pressure to be successful in a career that others have been a success in too. Have you ever felt that along the way?
Well, I didn't overlap with my father. My father retired before I came back into the profession. I mean, I took a 10-year break, and so I did spend 4 years at Perkins Will after my first job back in the profession, and then realized that it wasn't the firm for me, and that's when I set up the current firm. I come from a family of where we were always trying to live up to our mother's standards, and and I have siblings that are all very high achievers, and the next generation includes Pulitzer Prize winners and all sorts of other stars. So I think the pressure wasn't to live up to my father and grandfather. It was, as I say, influential as they were, on my life and career. It was the peer pressure of just all the other members of the family.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. My older brother, who started in architecture and ended up being head of Far Eastern Studies at Harvard for his career and chair of the economics department, there was more pressure on me to sort of live up to him when I got to Cornell. Yeah, but.
So tell us a little bit about that growing up experience. Where did you grow up? What did you want to be as a kid?
Well, I think that was a deeper thought than I was having most of my growing up years. But I grew up, in a somewhat privileged background, and my college application, for instance, consisted of coming down to breakfast, and the dean of arts and sciences at Cornell was staying with my parents because my mother was head of the alumni association. And he said, "Where are you thinking about going to school?" And I said, "Cornell." And he said, "Okay." My mother filled in the forms, and
that was that.
That was that. I mean, so but I grew up in Evanston, Illinois, which is a city just north of Chicago. It's where Northwestern is. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a house that my grandfather had designed and built. And I went to an elementary school that my grandfather designed and built, which was next to a park named after my grandfather. And then, and I had kind of a normal childhood, and went through public school, and it was a happy childhood. As I said, I was sent to art school, and I liked to draw, and I had a lot of friends, but I didn't really think a whole lot about my future until it came home to me when I was in architectural school that maybe I should have done more thinking about this, and so, but in the end, I came back, and I'm very glad that I did.
Yeah.
I've had some of a charmed career, and I've gotten to do the sort of projects I like to do, and I've got to do them all around the world, which I still enjoy. And, and it's nice to be back on airplanes again, and
What I didn't realize is that, so your grandfather founded his firm, your father founded his firm, and you founded your firm. They're all separate firms.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. So there's this entrepreneurial spirit, and that obviously cascades through your entire family.
Yeah. Well, my grandfather, he when he came back from MIT, where he went to school, he went to work for Daniel Burnham, and when Burnham was running the Great White City, my grandfather ran the rest of the office, and then the office was shrinking back after in 1894, and there was a big depression on, and so the office was shrinking, but Burnham helped him go out on his own and got him his first commission, and the rest is history. I mean, he and the other Prairie School architects, but he went deaf before my father graduated from school, so he wound down his practice. So there really wasn't a firm for my father to go to, and it was the Great Depression in 1935 when he and his college roommate Phil Will started Perkins Will, and then my father retired 4 years before I came to Perkins Will. So I was recruited by his successors. I had been running 4 offices for an English firm called Llewellyn Davies, and that was based in London, but I ran the Toronto, New York, Houston, and Caracas offices for them.
Oh, wow.
At an age that makes me wonder what they were thinking when they hired me. But
so you've always been traveling internationally throughout your entire career. Yeah, I know that's just having gotten to know you. You love the travel. You love, doing the international projects, and I'm always jealous of where you've been and where you go. And I know after this you're leaving, and it's pretty extraordinary. So tell us a little bit about Perkins Eastman itself. So the founding of it, it's, and I have some statistics here, the second largest New York-based design firm per cranes, the 10th largest architectural firm in the United States, the 4th largest architecture firm in the world by revenue. You win your rankings and you name it. You have 13 offices,
24
offices, 13 in the United States. You're into all of these practice areas. I mean, when you and Mary-Jean started, could you imagine that it would have gotten as big as it is?
No. We founded the firm. It wasn't, we're 27 people on day one. So, and we were 50 fairly quickly. But it was built around the idea that we wanted to be really expert at a finite number of building types. The original number was 6. Over time, it's grown to 16. But I mean, there are things that and most of what we're interested in are project types where architecture has a real capability of really helping the institution or client fulfill their mission and going to have a very positive impact on people's lives. So some of the things that we focused on, and they very much relate to some of the interests my father and grandfather had, are projects that weren't necessarily all that glamorous. Senior living, which is where we have the largest specialized practice in the world, is a real backwater architecture when we got into it. But demographics and other things have awoken people to the fact that this is a very important specialized area of practice. And I was in Bangkok a week ago. I was walking the job site of a large high-rise retirement community that doing just outside the Bangkok airport, which I'm proud of, and for a very, very nice client. And I mean, schools is another one of our elementary and secondary schools. Obviously, some university work as well, but schools was the core of my grandfather's practice. It was the core. It was the greatest love of my father in his practice. While he was running Perkins Will, they did 1,000 schools, and it's what they built their reputation on. But it was after we'd been in practice for about 10 years, we realized that to really live up to our what we said we wanted to be, we had to, and at that time we were still 6 or 7 practice areas. Each one, we said we need at least a core team of a dozen or so in each one. You multiply 7 times, a dozen, you get 84, you add in administrative and other stuff, you say, well, instead of being 50, we better be 100.
Right.
And that was our 5-year goal. But by the end of that year, we were 100. And then basically from 94 to 2007, we added 50 people a year.
Wow.
So it happened rather quickly.
And then when did you start making acquisitions?
Well, we did really early on. Most of them were friends of mine.
Okay.
Or former partners. I mean, the remaining core of the English firm's New York office, for instance, was a planning firm, Buckhurst, Fish, and Jackmar, and Paul Buckhurst and I, who were a very close friend and colleague, and we said, why aren't we still working together? And so that was the first, and our healthcare practice was really, we went from doing some healthcare to being the biggest healthcare practice in the city when 3 former Perkins Will partners, Bob Larson and Joe Shine and Dave Ginsberg, and Larson, Shine, Ginsberg, who were a good deal older than I was, looked at us as a way to, as for them to have a retirement plan, and they joined us. So this is now 25 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and when we either are entering a new practice area or we want to strengthen an office or be in a new location, we've usually done it through acquisition to give us a solid base locally or in the practice area.
Is there any sector that has eluded you so far that you're still wanting to get into? Well,
Mary-Jean would say that I never met a practice area I didn't like and want to do, but I think we're happy with the mix that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you pretty much have them all covered. I can't even think of some that.
Oh, no. I mean, there are things that we don't do airports. We don't do prisons. We're interested in retail as part of mixed use, but freestanding retail is not of much, I mean, there's a lot of things we don't do.
Yeah. I agree. As far as, projects that you've done over your career, I know me personally, there's a few that always stick out that are sort of my babies that I will always cherish, whether it was because of the client or maybe the design itself or just the time in my life, right? Yeah. Are there projects that you think, extraordinarily highly of and look back on?
Yeah. It's, there's usually at least one a year. I mean, it's what keeps it fun is that, and you're right to say that the client makes a huge difference. I mean, if the client is somebody you really care about and respect and they want to do something really good and they're fun to be with, that makes even a fairly routine project memorable. And I mean, one of our early projects was the headquarters of the National Testing Center for Consumers Union. They were moving from Mount Vernon over to taking an old office warehouse building on the sawmill in Yonkers, and they needed it turned into their National Testing Center. This is Consumer Reports magazine. And their advisor put us on the list of firms to be considered, and they didn't have anything completed. We had 4 or 5 good-sized projects under construction, and they looked at it and said, well, nice young firm, but not ready for prime time, and dropped us. And the advisor said, no, you ought to meet this firm. And so the number 2 person there who was running the projects said, okay, have this Brad Perkins make an appointment, come see me. And I came into his office. He took one look at me and he said, you're back on the list. I was his daughter's soccer coach. And so, and they were an extraordinarily wonderful client, very smart people. And that was, both Mary-Jean and I worked on that. And the CEO, what really clinched it was the CEO was a woman, and she wanted to work with a woman architect. So she and Mary-Jean bonded, and we worked for them for 25 years.
Yeah.
But there are others more recently. I mean, we're just down the street from something I spent 10 years on, the TKTS booth in Times Square. And, that was an extraordinary, again, wonderful client. It was really several clients.
Wasn't that a competition initially?
It was an ideas competition, and 2 recent graduates in Australia submitted. It was a one-board ideas competition, and there were several hundred. And these 2 guys, Troy Ropia, submitted the idea of a glowing red set of steps. So it was their original idea, and it captured the fancy and the Times Square Alliance and the Theater Development Fund and others who were said about wanting to do this, but nobody knew how to make this idea, which was just a rendering, into a building. And so finally they hired an advisor, Peter Lair, and he said he'd help them, but he needed to bring in an architect to work with him. And Peter and I were friends, and it took 10 years to turn that into, between raising the money and finally the last part of the budget. Bloomberg wanted to see it done, and he made sure that there was funding for it, and to be able to work on, even that's probably the smallest project I've worked on in years, but it has tremendous impact.
Yeah.
The other end of the scale, in 2008, I was part of a large team that was competing to do the new master plan for the capital of Vietnam, Hanoi. And we were mostly, it was made up of a number of Korean firms, and then we were the sub to one of those firms. And then when I was asked to come over to be part of the entourage for the presentation, because the client was the prime minister and the rest of the cabinet, and I was taking my sons-in-law to the Beijing Olympics, and so I came via Hanoi, and I was met at the airport by the lead people from the Korean team, and they said there's been a change of plans. The prime minister wants the lead planner to be an American. They're somewhat sensitive about being talked down to by their rich Asian, and the people who treat them these days as equals, as we should, given our tragic history together. The Americans are actually the preferred partners in many cases in Vietnam. So I made the presentations. I'd like to say it was the quality of my presentation got us the job, but the other 2 finalists, who were 2 very well-known international firms, sort of misunderstood that what the problem was. It was to be a comprehensive master plan because communist country owns all the land, and therefore the master plan controls all capital spending. It controls all land use for 3,300 square kilometers of for the capital of a wonderful country, 100 million people and with a long history. I mean, Hanoi is 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
And
wow.
Anyways, there was a little problem at the end of 2008 that you might have read about.
Yeah.
And to have a nice place to go for a week every month for the next 30 months was a high point.
When you're traveling, is there a favorite office that you like to be in?
Well, it used to be China.
Okay.
It's probably Mumbai now.
Oh.
China has been impossible, and the atmosphere under the current leadership the government's getting much more intrusive. And I went 154 times to China.
Yeah, I know you did.
Yeah. but India is not as much fun as China, but it's the projects we get to work on there are extraordinary as well. I mean, working on, among other things, a whole new university right outside of Delhi that's been very successful so far, and we have another probably 10 years to go on it.
And so, is India really a future growth area, you think, for architecture?
Well, it's now the largest country in the world. It has a growing economy. It is a terrible advertisement for democracy. And, it's so much easier to get things done in China, where if the government wants it to happen, it happens.
Yeah.
The government can want it to happen in India, and it still doesn't happen. But it's a very challenging place to work. So it's not like China, and it does have an established architectural community. So there are really only 3 American firms that are active there right now. I mean, there are other firms that do occasional projects. So other firms were there and pulled out, but it's been very good to us.
Yeah. What I find extraordinary about you and your career is that and you and I talked about this at one time when we went out to lunch, is that I find it very difficult for me to not get involved in all of the nitty gritty, to not be constantly checking my email and worrying about the smallest of little details, whether that's a cultural thing at the firm or an issue on a project, or even, and I am very, very client focused. To me, you seem always client focused. You're always visiting clients. You're always on the road. You're always doing that. How do you balance all of that? How do you balance the day-to-day pressures of sort of running a giant organization that's literally 10 times the size of mine, and still kind of be away and able to enjoy and be with those clients and let those relationships flourish?
Well, you have to have partners.
Mm-hmm.
This is a team sport, and Mary-Jean, who is beginning to pull back, spend more time up in the country, but she, for instance, was a terrific partner, and her skills were very complementary to mine, and she covered up some of the things I either didn't like to do or wasn't very good at. So, and that's been true of a lot of other. We've been lucky to have a lot of very good people and who I trust, and so that I know that when I'm away, it's not everything is going to fall apart. So,
Right.
and there's still, and I have been trying to transfer things to the next generation for a while now, and and so a lot of my former day-to-day headaches, like you have, are taken on by others now. So
Okay. And is that the plan, is to transition the firm slowly to the next generation?
Well, it better happen reasonably soon, but it's we are committed to remaining employee owned. I mean, we've had people try and acquire us, and we've said no. And if you do that, the only way that makes sense is to try and do an orderly transition. I saw my father do it very badly. I mean, he was with all the best intentions, but he put in mandatory retirement at 65, thinking that his life expectancy was the same as his parents in the early 70s, and then he lived to 90, and he was annoyed with himself for most of that time. And he just turned it over cold turkey, and Perkins Will initially made the typical mistake that a lot of firms do, which is when they've had a very strong founder, is that they say, well, we don't want that. So they go to management by committee, and Perkins Will did a committee of 12 and put the least offensive person in charge as president, and he got them involved in real estate development and caused them all sorts of problems, but they recovered from it. But so I've written articles on the issue of transition, and so I'm trying to do it in an orderly way. And and transition from the first to the second generation is usually the toughest transition period, and we're still it's a work in progress, right?
Well, that's good. Do you foresee a point in which you're fully retired, laying out by the sun, or do you just like you'll always have a leg in the race, I guess, too?
Well, I think my body will tell me. I've been lucky. My wife and I, good health, and we just finished a 2-hour Taekwondo class before this, and so. But at some point, realistically, I certainly can't I can't see working at the same pace I've always worked forever, because I've written enough, some of my books on senior living. I've written about the issue of biological aging, and it doesn't happen at the same rate for everybody, but it happens.
It eventually happens. Yeah.
And
unless they invent that where they can turn off the genome and reverse your aging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, staying in good health is at least minimizes. We've lost 2 valuable principals this year, to sudden death, a heart attack and a brain aneurysm, and that's a real wake-up call. Both of them younger than I am.
Yeah, sorry to hear. Yeah. Switching gears to sort of the current, state of the economy, the world economy. Using your crystal ball, you've been through many ups and downs along the way. Where do you see sort of everything going right now? Is it as bad as people foresee coming in the next, year or so? Or is this, are we already, as architects even, are we already through some of the tough times that were COVID?
I think we have some more challenges ahead of us. I think it's uneven. There are project areas of projects that are still healthy, and there are regions that are still healthy. I think the Northeast is in for a more challenging time than, say, California or the West Coast or parts of the Southeast. I think most of the firms here are, battening down the hatches right at the moment. It's not 2009,
right.
And it's not when I first was running offices. It was the mid '70s, and that was even worse. I've been through 6, I think, good-sized recessions, and I don't see something as bad as 2009 or 1975, but I don't see it being back to 2018 and 19 for a while.
Yeah, yeah. How long, in your experience, do the recessions last for architects?
The bad ones generally have been about 2 years. This one has already been underway for 3 years, and they're all different.
Yeah.
They're all different. I mean, it's hard to lump them together because the craziness that led to 2000, all the subprime and all the other dumb stuff that was going on was unique, and the OPEC-related and other things of the mid-'70s combined. That's when New York City was going bankrupt and all public construction stopped. I mean, firms were shedding, 80, 90% of their staff.
Yeah.
They're all, and then COVID,
Yeah. How has COVID changed your office culture, and are the different offices of all the offices around the country, are they treating the return to office differently, or is there one sort of size that fits all?
No, they're all different. Partly also size, ease of commute, things like that. But COVID, even though, thank God, the technology was there, to get us through it, and for us to continue to be reasonably productive, but it's not been a positive change. This is, as I said earlier, it's a team sport, and if the team isn't together, they're just on Teams or Zoom or something, and it's particularly, I think, bad for the younger staff who need to sit next to more experienced people and experience what they're doing and how they work, and doing that from your kitchen table is electronically is just not the same.
Yeah, and I also find it sad. A young person coming out of school and now they're sitting at home at their kitchen table and they're not getting that interaction in an office, whether good or bad in the office. All of those play into your learning experience and how to learn architecture in a team environment, really, because you're right, it is a team sport. But it also is there's the how do you work with your colleagues, and what are you working on this day, and how do you transfer that around? And it's more complicated than just sitting and writing computer code all day, which I also find sad. Someone sitting at home writing computer code all day at their kitchen table. But yeah. So talk to me about your books. I mean, most architects are not great writers. That's me for sure. Hence why we have a podcast right now. What you've written 9 books. Can you tell us a little bit about a few of the books? What books are come to mind that are your?
Well, I'm working on my 10th and probably likely to be my last. It's the most ambitious, which is I'm writing a history of architectural practice in the U.S. from 1880, which is basically when my grandfather went off to school, to whenever I finish. So that's, maybe 2025. And it's how the profession has evolved and changed in each decade. And I profile prominent firms in each decade, talk about the changes, and then use these firms to illustrate, how the profession was changing. And change is accelerating. So, the changes in the last, 4 decades are, much greater than the changes in the previous, 10. So, and it's been fun, but all the others, I was asked the first book I did was a textbook on planning and design of elementary and secondary schools. And I wrote it. I was asked by Steve Clement, who used to be the editor-in-chief of Architectural Record. He was doing a book series, and he asked me which one I wanted to do. And I said the school one because my father had done 2 textbooks on school design. And I was very much did it in part because I wanted to do it, but also because I wanted to have it as a way to build our school practice. And there's nothing like handing a textbook on the subject to a potential client. It tends to eliminate the credentials. And that book and the book I did on senior living were both translated into Chinese, and it helped a lot in China to be able to hand a textbook in Chinese. So then I used to teach at Harvard in the summer program on starting a design firm. And so the publisher I worked for, Wiley, asked would my co-teacher and I, would we turn that into a book, and then we did a second edition of that book. I've done 2 on international practice. The latest one was 2021, came out in 2021, talking about the basics of building and running an international practice. And there's a joke in our family that there's a publisher perish clause, and everybody writes. And so I think I have 7 of the bookshelves in my study are just books by family members.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, my grandmother was a writer, illustrator, and 50 of the books are hers. But,
wow.
But my brother, the one at Harvard, has, a whole long list, and then other members of the family. I'm included on that shelf some close friends' books also. My last college roommate went on to be a famous ice hockey player, and he's written 8 books.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Ken Dryden.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was, very cool.
Hall of Fame. Yeah, he's still a very close friend.
Wow, that's cool. So as we wrap up, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to tell the listeners?
Oh, I think this has been a fun conversation. I mean, we have a lot of shared experience, and we could probably go on and
forever.
Yeah, forever. Yeah.
I'll have you back for part 2. So, Brad, thank you so much for being my guest here on the Anti-Architect podcast. You're truly a legend in the industry, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I think this is it's been fun.
Great. Awesome. So to see and read more about Brad, you obviously can go to the Perkins Eastman website, perkinseastman.com. And very cool, Brad actually has a Wikipedia page. This is the first guest I had that has a Wikipedia page. I don't know if you even know that you have a Wikipedia page. You just look for Bradford Perkins Architect, and it's on there. I searched for myself to see maybe if I had one, but apparently there's a Christian Giordano who's a Swiss anthropologist, but so very cool.
Well, there is another Bradford Perkins, but I think he's a professor at the University of Michigan. So
okay, this one's definitely you. So
okay.
well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Awesome.
Thank you, Christian.